Hi, today what I'm going to do on this video is which is really just a Zoom with a screen share, is to run through with a couple specific examples how I organize my notes, generate my notes, and then organize them at the same time in putting together the book I'm working on about alchemy in the 19th century. And I'm going to start by just looking through my alchemy folder. These are the basic skeleton of the book, starting with the acknowledgments, which is basically a draft that will end up, in the beginning of the book. First draft of the first paragraph. List of research assistants that I keep accumulating. Ashley just made it in there. List of archivists and archives that I have consulted, including one that I'm going to be looking at later. This is a Rosicrucian Society in New York. And that's just an ongoing document that I keep adding things to. The archives, I arrange by specific locations of the archives. So far, I've looked at more than one in London, so I've got those broken out, otherwise just where they are, so Oxford and so forth. What I do there is I include a kind of a master list of all the documents I looked at. Like that. And then if I haven't yet entered anything, it's just the collection of pictures. If I've started entering them, which is the case with Freemasons, the Freemasons Museum Library I was at earlier this year, I, again, start with the day I visited. I was there for 2 days, breaking it down into different people who were part of this correspondence network. And then in the case of this guy, Hockley, who I'm going to be coming back to, these are all the photographs, and then as I enter them, I convert the photograph IMG name into the archive name and number and page number, and I'll be going into that again later on. So that's my archive folder. This is a basically running tab of everything I've looked at so far, listed by author. I have color-coded in blue on this spreadsheet authors I've already looked at thoroughly in Hatha Trust, and the ones that aren't color-coded, I have not yet done that deep dive. And by the time I'm done researching this book, every single name here will have a blue mark next to it. I'll be coming back to this as I go through one of my examples, which is using Hatha Trust and Google Books to generate material. This is the book outline, which is right at this point just my notes that I keep adding to in order to, which this will turn into my book proposal within the next year or so. That's just basically random notes followed by a chapter outline, which again, I kind of move things around as I figure things out. I'm going to skip British periodicals. That's basically an old database that I have already entered everything in. Conference papers is just the 2 different conferences I've so far given papers at based on the book. Databases in progress are databases I haven't finished using or finished entering. And I'm going to be coming back to those as I move through. I would say that right now, 90% of my material is going to come from 2 places: Hatha Trust and newspapers.com. But there's additional things that I'm going to be using in terms of printed sources. Extra Alchemy is just a spillover file for other folders I've gathered. Newspapers is almost entirely newspapers.com. This is kind of, I'm going to go into this later, but basically this is the staging ground for entering these into my notes. And this is from the early 1880s. Anything related to the history of chemistry goes here. These are screenshots of newspaper articles that I then transcribed and put into my notes. And this is just basically in case I need to go back and check a quote, I can look for the article in the specific date and name of the newspaper just by copying that in. Then I'm right at the original source, so I don't have to go back to the database to do that. And finally, the most important three folders are notes, which is basically anything primary source or secondary source that's going to be in the shape that ends up being eligible for quoting in my book. And I've organized these in different folders that are themselves are expanding as I go through. So commentary started as one folder. Now it's 3 different files: popular delusions, imagination, and commentary. Within each file, I've got different subcategories. Samuel Taylor Coleridge shows up a lot, so he gets his own little category, and so forth. Same with Thomas Carlyle and George Dawson. Okay. And primary sources are basically anything that's too big to fit in my notes section. If I've got like an entire short story, or if I've got 3 chapters out of a book, I don't want to make my notes section too unwieldy. So what I do is in my notes section, I provide a short summary of that, and I say this is on file in primary sources, and say which folder it's in. So for instance, here is a article about Cornelius Agrippa published in 1856, which is the entire article. Okay, and I've got a summary of that in my notes section. So if I think I want to use this, I want to see what else there is, I want to dig deeper, I can go straight to that source. And finally, secondary sources, mostly PDF files of articles or scanned chapters from books. Once in a while, and these are organized, as are the primary sources, essentially in the same categories and folders that I organize my notes. So I can keep going back and forth to each one. So when I'm writing up a section in my book on, say, frauds, I can go to the fraud file here. I can go to the fraud folder here, where I have a dozen or so longer sources on fraud. And I can finally go to the fraud folder here, right? Once in a while, I will get enough of what I need just from scanning pages in Google Books. So here's what I did here. It had, it didn't have anything else. It was pretty clear that I was going to need, apart from these several pages. So I just scanned them. I didn't have to go order it from interlibrary loan to get access to that source. I don't do that very much because I usually want to kind of make sure, but I can usually tell from the table of contents and from what I have that it's, it's done talking about alchemy. It's not going to do it anywhere else in the book. And that's basically, and then finally for secondary sources, I have a master list of everything I've got so far. And I've got that broken down by category. Again, just following the same logic of my notes with subcategories. So here are, this is a guy named Elihu Vedder who painted a relatively famous painting of a dying alchemist, or dead alchemist actually, and there's several articles about him and books that some of which I've already looked up, some of which I have to go still see. Okay, so that's the basic idea for my notes. And as you can see, I've set this up so I can basically, when I start writing, I'm in a very good position to kind of know exactly where everything is and to be able to kind of focus on just a few files for every section of every chapter that I write. Okay, so I'm going to turn now to going from the databases to generating the notes that go in here. And in order to show you how that works, I'm going to look at one more file, open one more file, which is this one, which is basically my halfway house. This is where I put everything before I then go and transfer them over to my files here. This basically just makes it a lot easier to go straight from HathiTrust and just keep piling up the notes without having to go and look for individual folders each time. And often I'm going to do about 60 or 70 pages of notes normally, and often there will be 8 or 10 batches of notes, paragraphs or two under each folder. So this is the art folder, and I will put them in under the subheadings that they'll go into in the actual folder, right? So these are exactly in the same order as in the notes section. In many cases, I've put down a kind of a finding aid. So let me see. For gunpowder in the discoveries folder, if I do a search within that folder for Cavendish's experiments, I'll get right to this place, so I don't have to spend much time scrolling through and finding it. Okay, so this is what I'm going to be adding stuff to from HathiTrust and also from newspapers.com when I get to that database to show you. I have HathiTrust bookmarked, so here we go. Search terms I have in this file, which is also all the magazines I've looked at. You'll see one example of this as I go through today. If the magazine already exists in my notes, I've gone through every single issue that refers to alchemy, I know I don't need to go back through them. This is kind of like the equivalent of my authors file, but listing it by volume, which I don't list in the authors file. Okay, and here's also, since I'm going to have this open usually when I'm looking in HathiTrust, I also have put my search terms here. Change to any of these words. If they're all of these words, I'm not going to find a single thing. And then I go to my authors file, and I don't look for anything that's blue, because I've already done that. What I do instead is start with the first one that's not in blue, Rockwell, enter it, limit it by year, before 1925. There's so little published before 1775, which is my other cutoff year, that I just say before 1925, and then I search. So, I think I decided I'm not going to do that for this demonstration because there's some problematic characters in that author. I'm going to start with Rodenberg instead. Okay. And only 2 results. I already have this one. I don't have this one. And I've actually gone through these already, so I know what I'm looking for, which is alchemists with a Y. That's the old spelling of alchemy. This is not a terribly old book, but he's apparently kind of old-fashioned. And that should turn up exactly 1 hit, and I know that's going to be under Chaucer. So I go to Chaucer, spell it correctly, and I will be putting his full bibliographical citation here. I'm not always going to know it's going to be about Chaucer. I can usually kind of figure that out from just this little snippet, and here's Chaucer's name. So I'd be pretty sure this is where it goes. If it ends up not going there, I can just copy and paste and move it. So Julius Rodenberg. And the nice thing about HathiTrust is that most of the title, or the whole title and author, are going to be always up on the left-hand corner, upper left-hand corner. So I can copy it from there. Copying and pasting, just because the fonts are so weird, is not really worth the trouble for such a short bit of title. And since that does not include the publishing information, I do that here. London, Richard Bentley and Son, 1875. Okay, so I'm ready to transcribe my notes. For that, I go to Google Books. Why don't I go to Google Books initially? Because I don't get nearly as comprehensive search results that way. HathiTrust has literally everything, but everything on HathiTrust is also in Google Books. So Google Books lets me do more in terms of full text and a couple of other things. No, I'm still in. Sorry, I've got Google Books basically. That's what I wanted. I've got Google Books Advanced Book Search kind of as my home page on Safari. So I put in the quote that I copied down, and that is the only really guaranteed way to get right where I want to go in Google Books, because Google Books is kind of quirky that way. But I do that, and here we are, okay? Open it up, and now to get the full text so I can just transcribe it directly, I go to View in Plain Text, look up alchemy to get my bearings. Here it is. And I happen to know that if Chaucer shows up in connection with alchemy, it's going to be about the Canon's Yeoman's Tale, which is the only one of the Canterbury Tales that talks about alchemy. And I just kind of look a bit to see where it starts picking up. At Boughton, 6 English miles from Canterbury, we have the surprise of seeing a couple of new pilgrims. This is where it shows up. Copy, paste, because it's going to be highlighting that. I don't want that in my notes. But I do want more of this, because the story of the gold maker, he's still talking about alchemy. Looks like he stopped it to talk about that after that paragraph. So these are the 2 paragraphs I'm going to want. Copy them both in. Get ready to add page numbers, and then to get rid of the highlight, go to Edit, Clear Formatting, and since I like Calibri, I switch the font. Okay, so there's my notes. Now I go back to the text, find out what's on what page. The alchemists are right at the beginning of page 60. So I figure out where that sentence starts. That's page 59. And that is page 59 to 60. And I'd probably spend a little more time processing this mentally if I wasn't doing a demonstration, but this is basically what I need out of this book, and it'll add to what I already have, which is like a ton of quotes about 19th century people talking about Chaucer's depiction of alchemy, back in the medieval period. I go back, and I go on to my next author, Roger, with a D. And I already have Aberdeen doctors at home and abroad, and I don't really want the one in German. So that's all for Roger. Move on. Add an S to Roger. I already have Scientific Agriculture. And here's where the magazines show up. American Journal of Science. Yes, I have that. So I don't need any of these. I've already looked at them. So I scroll down until I find something I want. I've already happen to know I already have this. I do not have Cyclopedia of Insurance in the United States. I will check just to be sure. That should give me enough. Nope. So, where does alchemy show up? Here we go. And I looked at this already. I know it's going to show up in insurance. And I've got a category for that. Not that one, though. This one. This is under the money as a metaphor. And this is insurance companies that are referred to using the metaphor of alchemy. So what do? I'm going to add in the book this is in here, which is Hayden's Annual Cyclopedia of Insurance. Of the United States. I could include these years, but it'll be obvious from the publication date. Insurance Journal Company, 1911. Okay, what do we got here? We have, let's make this a little bigger. We have a report from the National Insurance Convention. In Mobile, Alabama. September 1910. Now, it's most likely, not definitely going to be the case that when I get to 1910, in my search through newspapers, right now I'm at 1891, I'll run into this. I will know that I don't need to transcribe it at that point because I'll have the person giving the speech in my notes on the author page. And this will be a lot easier to transcribe than the newspapers, which don't have full text, right? So 1910. Speech by President Hartigan. I should be able to figure out, here he is, J.A. Hartigan. Who's the insurance commissioner from Minnesota. Okay, and this is a direct quote from him. And it looks like I'm going to want the whole quote, which HathiTrust is not giving me, right? It's just giving me the last little bit, actually. So I'm going to kind of go down a little lower. And then go to Google Books. Here he is. I went lower because that way the highlighted text is not what I want. So I don't have to de-highlight it. Save me one step. This is on page 426. And there is a transcription error. Different. Nice thing about spell check is it's good for catching transcription errors, which, you know, OCR isn't perfect. And just want to make absolutely sure I caught the alchemy reference. I did. Many of the most vexing problems will yield to this alchemy of mutual confidence. Now, I'm looking this over. This is not, in fact, about insurance. This is about regulation, because national insurance commissioners are regulators. So I'm going to move this to political alchemy. And I think I have a regulation section there, but I'm not sure I've included that in my list. So I'm going to put that under municipal government, and I'll figure out what to do with that when I transfer things over. But so, yeah, what I'm doing basically as I go through my notes is I'm thinking about where things will fit in the book, right? And that's what all these categories are for. I'm not just mindlessly thinking, oh, this is about insurance, therefore it goes under insurance. I read the quote, I kind of say, oh, this is actually not specifically about insurance. It is, of course, but the alchemy reference, and that's key, the alchemy reference is speaking to the mutual trust that regulation provides. Okay, so it belongs there instead. What work is alchemy doing in this sentence? And that's what's going on. And that's basically it for Rogers. Okay, I'm not going to go on because this gives you a decent taste of what I'm doing with HathiTrust and how it works for me. Okay. Multiply that by like 10,000 and that'll be that half of my book. Okay. The next database I'm going to talk about is newspapers.com, which is a database that's actually available at New York Public Library. So if you have your New York Public card, you've got access to it. I've got everything set up to get into it because I use it a lot. This is a database that is kind of bought and paid for by Ancestry.com, but it's really kind of amazing. It's not as comprehensive as HathiTrust is, but it's, especially for the US, it's not really great for the UK, but I've got UK databases on through CUNY that I can use for that. And I already have gone through those. So really right now what I'm doing is working my way through American newspapers. As I said before, I'm up to 1891. And for this, it isn't quite as agile as HathiTrust. It doesn't let me look for every single search term I want. I've tried, and it kind of peters out after 2 terms. So I keep it simple, alchemy or alchemist. I go through and do a separate search for the old spellings, which are pretty much not showing up at all by 1890. But I turned up a lot of stuff for earlier years doing that as a separate search. And then I've gotten through 1890. I'm going to just start up and do a few examples for 1891. And then for this, it's the entire United States, because it does have newspapers for Canada, UK, Australia, etc. Hit United States of America, so it knows what I'm doing. I think it does. Let's see if that connected. Yeah, it looks like this is all American sources. Yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna sort by date, oldest first. And I'm going to be skipping over a lot for 2 reasons. One is there's going to be some that I remember. I just finished 1890 a couple of weeks ago. So be some that I remember from doing that. If I'm unsure, I can look for titles and authors. If there is an author, there often is not for newspapers, to see if it shows up here. I've entered everything from 1890 here. And now I'm going to I'm going to get out of this for the time being, create a new Word file that I'm going to put over here. I'm going to call this Word file 1891. And jump in. Okay, what is this? Nativity of Christ. I've got this sermon already, I know that, so I don't need that. And I'm going to pay attention to the wording because it's going to show up again. Worthy Alchemist is the same file. That's the same file. Newspapers.com, the further you get into the 20th century, closer you get to the 20th century, the more newspapers there are, and the more they are sharing their stories. And so it's a lot like HathiTrust in that there's a lot of repetition, but if you're persistent and careful, you can still get what you want. Okay. I'll just keep going until I find something that's new. This looks new. Let's see what the article is. The medicinal qualities of gold. Yeah, this will do. This is something I might be able to use. This is basically about using gold as a cure. So what do I do with this? There's no Google Books to turn to because they don't have newspapers. So I copy and paste it. Take a screenshot rather, and what I do is, for future reference, and to make it easier when I'm doing the transcribing, I put the title, author if there is one, which there often isn't. Name of the newspaper and date. I don't bother with the page. And, still 1st of January. Make it a little smaller so it shows up on the same page. Okay, I'm going to do maybe one or two more. Alchemy of the Pawnbroker, that's not one I remember either, but it might be older. Story of Jewels. Oh yeah, I have this already. Okay, World's Fair City, real estate dealers. Okay, this is a rather long paragraph, but the unerring alchemy of fulfillment. I'm not really sure what that means, but that's for a later day. And I'm going to get just enough to figure out what's going on here. It looks like it's a board of directors, real estate agents, who advertised in the World's Fair directory for the World's Fair that was in Chicago. I should have enough to figure that out. It's probably not something I'm going to even use, but let's go with that. Realty and the fair. Interocean, which is the only Chicago paper they have in this database. Make sure I know this is Chicago, although I do. And then pop these in. Okay. Let's just see if there's one more I can put in. It's kind of like being stuck in traffic, and eventually they get tired of reprinting the same article, and you get some movement. Okay, pyramids. No, same one. This is basically a sermon about the three wise men. He would give the same sermon every year with variations, and he was one of the most popular preachers in the country, which is why it gets repeated everywhere. Pretty sure I have this. Sunak, yeah, I do. Okay, this might be new. No, I've got this. These look actually new, so let me go back up here. Okay, Arabians, they're new. Transmuting metals. Okay, so this is obviously very, very good. The question is it pulled from a magazine article? Not obviously. Okay, let's start doing some digging to see if this is actually a new thing or not. Title doesn't really give it away because they always change titles. Okay, so far so good. That's not the same. Next thing to do is to pull a quote. Arabians cultivated the knowledge of alchemy. See if I've got that in my notes. No, that's not the same quote. Okay, then finally, go to Google Books. It's cultivated the knowledge of alchemy. So, as far as I can tell, this is a brand new article, probably taken from a different newspaper because it's a pretty tiny newspaper. But this is the first time I've run into it. So I'm going to reduce it a little bit and snap away. Yeah, I did. Okay, I'm going to leave these hanging out here because I know I'm going to want to transcribe these using my transcription software, which I haven't told you about yet. Alchemists lived in the most ancient times. Okay, get back into my newspaper file. Transmuting metals. Like I say, I really doubt this was the first place it ever showed up because the Fillmore Weekly Chronicle didn't have someone who knew much about alchemy. I'm willing to guess. But if I need to change the original newspaper later, I can do that. Oh, that's interesting. 19 August 1891. Looks like somehow they got off of the start from early estate thing. That's fine. It got me a more interesting article. So it's almost definitely the case that this showed up sometime earlier in a bigger paper. But the important thing is it's only in newspapers.com. I looked everywhere else and didn't find it. Okay, so now what I'm going to do with these files is I am going to use artificial intelligence, the only time I ever use it, to transcribe it. Last summer, I'm going to talk about this in class, I'm sure. Last summer, I beta tested this program called Leo. It won me about 6,000 free hits, or free whatever uses. I'm about 3/4 of the way to go on that, and it's a pretty good program. It works really well with print. I'll show how it works with archives in a while, and it's very straightforward. So put in the title, transmuting. Doesn't really matter because I'm not going to be saving it anywhere. Transmuting 1. Then transcribe. Takes a little while, but not. Well, the last time I tried to do this on Zoom, it took forever, so I'm not going to predict. But anyway, while I'm waiting for that, I'll use this as an example. Well, what I basically do with these files is I create a copy. Duplicate. Where did that? Should be able to duplicate it. I'll just do save as. Call it 1891 entered. Open 1891 next to it. And what I'm going to do, I'm not going to give you, I'm not going to really show you, but I'm going to kind of give you the basic idea. Oh, I didn't save 1891, so. Okay, so let me just do this. All right. So I end up with two files, identical, but then I get rid of this, and I use this to do the transcribing I'm going to do. For a file this long, I will probably use my software, but I might not. But let's just assume I'm going to go in for like something that's just a paragraph or so. I will just do the transcribing myself. It's like not worth the trouble to go into the software. So let's just get started on this to give you a sense of how it works. Okay, and then when I finish transcribing, I'll have this, and I'll still have the original here that I can check the quote against, right? And I'm going to save that, all right? And I'll have this, I'll have the same thing here. And I can get rid of that, get rid of that. And then for transmuting the metals, hopefully, yes. And then I can do the same thing with the other two screenshots, right? You just plug the screenshot right in. Then you have to, adjust because it's not giving you, it's not, it's printing it, it's showing it the way it looks like on the page, which is annoying. But anyhow, that doesn't take too long. And I'll have this nice beefy article that I'm probably going to put in the history section. So I'm going to put that above it so I know where it goes. Here, I'm probably going to put metaphor commerce because they're real estate agent. And for this one, I'm going to put history medicine. Okay, I happen to know those are where they belong. I go back to author list and, assuming I've done all the entering I needed to do. I go back here, look up, oh yeah, it's under chemistry medicine. Yeah, I guess that's what I want. And, assuming this is all transcribed, I put that there. I look for commerce. Ditto. And I look for history. I don't have much in there, so it's... This is the general history file. And, I put the full transcription there. Okay, so for now, let's just assume I made it through all the newspapers. I made it through a lot more on Hat the Trust. And what next? Okay, well, next thing, I'm going to save this and get back to it. I'm going to save this and get back to it later. Okay, so next thing I do, and obviously I will be multiplying these new hits by about 100. I'm going to create a new spreadsheet. I don't need to for what I'm about to do, but this is the process I use. And in this spreadsheet, I put everything I generated, newly generated. Since there's very little here, I might even miss some stuff, but and I don't need to create headings because I know what I'm, I just replicate what I do in the author database, which is basically I'll go up to the top. Oh, okay. It's last name, first name, date, title, title of what it's in, if it's in a magazine, main subject heading, and then secondary subject heading. Okay. So for this, this is under alchemists actually, because I have a subsection for patrons of alchemy. So I put in Roby J. 1831. Traditions of Lancaster. These don't have to be complete titles because this is just a way of marking what I've done. And this is under history / alchemists. And then the alchemist is, in this case, the patron of alchemy, Edward III. Transmuting metals. I'm going to put that a little bit lower because that's going to show up underneath. I put everything without an author at the bottom, 1891. And that's going to be just under general history. That's all I need for that. I don't put newspaper titles because they show up in so many newspapers, it would just not really be a point. And I know it's in a newspaper if it doesn't have if it's not in italics, and if it doesn't have a secondary title, it's going to be in a newspaper. So Julius. $1875. Fiction. Chaucer. It might be everything. Oh, there's a couple more. But this gives you a sense of all the different categories I have. Okay, I know there was chemistry also. So medicinal qualities of gold. Actually, I think that's supposed to be chemistry medicine. Okay, that's basically, oh yeah, commerce. Okay, I think that's all I have so far. I'm not going to even enter these, but these I can drop in because I've already collected them here, right? So go back to Roby. Insert row. And this is all set up just to drop right in. And likewise with Rodenberg. Okay, so that's that. The only other thing I need to do at this point, I'm only going to do it for those two sources, is go back to my notes. And it's full circle, right? So notes, alchemists, under history. I'm just going to double check to make sure this is the right Edward. Yeah, this is the same guy. So go to Edward III, 1831. Just plop them in. Likewise with Chaucer. Fiction, literature. Chaucer's under major works. He's the first one to show up, so here to get where I want right away, I go 187 to get close to 1875. And here we are. Copy. Paste. And there you have it. Basically, this is what I do roughly 8 hours every day. And that's basically the process I use with variants. There's different databases where it works differently. Finally, though, I almost forgot, I am going to do just 1 or 2 manuscripts, because that's a slightly different process, although really not much different. So for manuscripts, I'm getting into, basically with those, I break them down into specific people, typically for sets of correspondence, and I treat those like primary sources that I put all together in the same folder. In this case, the folder will be probably called Irwin correspondence, because this is this guy, F.G. Irwin, who was a Freemason who held a huge correspondence with lots and lots of different people. Hockley was one of his biggest correspondents. I've already gotten through much of this folder. I've got, about 10 to go. Get me up into the archive section, and I already showed you this once already. This is what I've entered already, and this is what I have left to go. Now, a big advantage I have with the Irwin papers is they're extremely detailed summaries of every single letter. So if the letter doesn't have anything really obviously quotable, what I will do typically is just list the summary. So to get to the summary, I'm going to go to the National Archives in England, which has these. I'm going to enter in Hockley and Irwin, which should get me what I need. Yeah. And then I'm going to search within here for the archive for the specific letter I'm interested in, which will be (8/22), because that's the next one. This is a list I have of all the different letters I made pictures of. So I'm going to put in search 8/22. Oh, and I need to multiply the items per page. There it is. Here's the letter. I'm going to copy it down because I must have thought when I went through all these earlier that it was at least a little bit interesting. I'm going to include the correct archive name and call it a summary, so I know it's not my transcription. I'm going to include the date in here because it's not listed in this description, which is 12 May 1875. Then I'm going to read it, the summary. Mentions receiving books and manuscripts and is sending Irwin a parcel. This is enough for me to want to make a full transcription. What I'm interested in their correspondence is collectors of alchemy books. Hockley and Irwin were probably two of the most prolific collectors of alchemy books around in the 1870s, and this is a great correspondence for talking about that. So I'm going to get out of this, I'm going to get into this. I'm going to open this page. Take a screenshot of it. I'll show you why I'm doing that in a second. Take a screenshot of the next page. Well, typically I would just transcribe it, but for now I'll just do this. Okay, and now I'm going to go back to my trusty transcription software. And I'm going to, that's not what I want. Okay. My transcription software can handle 2 consecutive pages of text. It's not very good at more than that. So I get 2 for the price of 1 when I bunch them together. And I make this smaller. Take a picture. Sorry, take another picture. Go back to Leo. Pull this over. I'm going to call this Hockley 22 because that's the archive number. Hit transcribe, hit continue. Go back here, there's 2 documents. And I'm gonna just borrow this from here. I want to be able to find it, to go back and find it, to check it if I ever use anything from it. I'm going to do that by listing it as 22 with 1 in parentheses for page 1 and 22 with 2 in parentheses for page 2. That's now been entered once I've entered the transcription into my notes. And I wait for this to show up, which it might not do right away. It takes longer to transcribe. Oh, it looked like there we are. Don't need to save this. Okay, and copy and paste. Now, Leo is not especially good with alchemy titles, so I am going to this is so I know it's the actual transcription. I'm going to get back in here, open up this page. Although it looks like he's actually not getting into too much detail here. So okay, so there's nothing about specific books here, but it's a kind of a wonderful letter because it's all about how to open a box full of books, which I might be able to use. You know, it's good because it gives you a nice little material piece of the action, which you might not get in a printed source. So it's one of the nice things about archives, obviously. Okay, so I'm going to leave it at that. You've been very patient if you've stayed through this whole thing, and yeah, and that's basically a few examples. I tried to be as detailed as I could and also as realistic as I could, hence, you know, wading through dozens of the same newspaper article to find 2 or 3 that worked. That's very, very typical. And yeah, and I have found it very, very effective at keeping masses of data, like, you know, right, 15, 20,000 separate documents in enough of an organization and order to be able to efficiently turn it into a book. Okay, so I hope you learned something, and I will look forward to talking to you about this in class.